While I've never had to use a green book, obviously seeing how I was not around in the 1960s, I did have to use something that is similarly titled. Have you ever heard of a blue book? Yeah, this is perfect for all of your written examinations so that you're able to get everything written down in a neat, loose leaf style fashion. Huh? What do you think of that? Sounded as lame as I thought it would be in my head. Okay. What is up, everybody? Random Man here, bringing you my review for Green Book. Set in the 1960s, the plot of this road dramedy basically follows Tony Vallelonga, played by Viggo Mortensen, a white Italian-American bouncer who was hired by an African-American pianist named Don Shirley, played by Mahershala Ali, to be his driver and security as he embarks on a concert tour within the Deep South. Going into this movie, I was really looking forward to it. Now, recently, my anticipation for this film got amplified before seeing it with all of the positivity and awards buzz it's been getting. When this movie premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival a few months ago, it won the People's Choice Award there, and recently, earlier this week actually, it was named the best film of 2018 by the National Board of Review. So of course, I got more excited to see it, but even before all of this awards buzz has been given to this film, I really dug the look of the trailers for this movie. It looked like it had two great leads with Mortensen and Ali at the center of it all. And I was also interested in the director of this film. Peter Farrelly, who didn't just direct this film, he also co-wrote it, was at the helm here. And he is one half of the two Farrelly brothers who, in the past, have been mainly known to direct slapstick comedies such as Dumb and Dumber, which debatably, to me, is my favorite comedy. Starting out with the cast and their performances, we have Viggo Mortensen in the role of Tony Vallelonga, aka Tony Lip, as he likes to be known as. Now, this is a guy who I've really liked recently in Captain Fantastic, and I love him as Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And here, in a similar role to Captain Fantastic, where there are some comedic elements to this movie, but also has a lot of underlying drama, I think he does another exceptional job here as he has a lot of layers with his character. At first, he seems like a stereotype of Italian-American culture, but you see where he is coming from and how his attitude changes from the beginning of the film all the way through the course of it. It also helps that the dialogue he spews out is really hilarious, and also he is very likable even though he's a very grimy and crude kind of guy. In stark contrast, we have Mahershala Ali as Don Shirley, the talented piano player who Tony drives around through the Deep South and also has to protect. Now, compared to Tony Lip's personality, the attitude of Don Shirley is much more refined, classy, and even stuck up at times. When Ali, I found to be outstanding, like Mortensen here, and the chemistry that they have with each other is amazing. They work off of each other incredibly well, not just when they are arguing with each other or they get into little squabbles in their drives to and from venues, but also in some more personal moments with each other, in having them both grow. I also have to give a mention to Linda Cardellini as the wife to Tony. Now, she is given a little bit more to do here than I expected in being the wife of one of our leads, and we see her from time to time whenever she is reading letters sent back to her by Tony, which Don has a little bit of a hand in writing. But I did enjoy the screen time and performance that Cardellini gave. But with the cast here, of course, it's our two central leads with Mortensen and Ali that really give the amazing performances here. The writing in this film, which was done again by Peter Farrelly, but also Brian Hayes Curie and Nick Vallelonga. He's the real-life son of Tony Vallelonga, Mortensen's character, so it was really interesting to see that he had a hand in writing the screenplay for this film. And given how this movie does begin and is set up with our characters here, it does create for the setting of 1962 America to be engrossing with its production design and other atmospheric elements, which I'll mention later, but also in how we are introduced to the culture. As I mentioned before, Tony is an Italian-American bouncer who could have easily verged on being a complete stereotype in this film. But like I said, there is growth with his character throughout. And what does incite Tony to take the job driving Don Shirley around is that the place that he usually works at, the Copacabana in New York, is closed for renovations for about 2 months. And while that is being done, he is looking for a job to help pass the time. And given how this job just sprung up to him to drive around Don Shirley, it would take about 8 weeks. And it is something that Tony at first is apprehensive to do. And also, when we are introduced to Don Shirley with the scene that him and Tony first share together, you can tell that there is a clashing of personalities between the both of them, even though Tony claims to have no problem with working for a black man. Although a scene earlier on in the movie does show some apprehension with. But of course, Tony ends up taking the job anyway with permission from his wife, and that's when the main set of events are put into motion for this film. Now, the way this movie is constructed writing-wise, it does rely a lot on dialogue, and that is what a bunch of this movie is comprised of. Talking scenes, whether it is between Tony and Don in the car going to and from venues, whether they are down at a motel, or when they just have some downtime in between Don playing the piano. And the camaraderie between them, again, I thought was immaculately done with the chemistry between Mortensen and Ali, but also setting up how different they are in contrast as characters. In speaking more of the writing, this film's title comes from the real-life guide that African-American motorists used to navigate the South and know where there are safe places to eat and sleep. And this movie takes place in America within the 1960s, so that does create for some relevant themes that are applicable to today's environment that we live in politically and socially. And plot-wise, this adds on to Tony not just being the driver to Don, he is also his protection. And a lot of this does come out within more of the dramatic moments of this film, especially one scene involving a revelation with Don. These dramatic moments involving racism and otherwise tolerance of people who are different from you in their backgrounds could have easily beaten us over the head with how self-important they are. But I think there is a nice balance in the tone of this movie with its drama and also its comedy. That's what I need to emphasize as well with this film, as seeing how it comes from a filmmaker who has been oriented with comedy in the past. This movie is hilarious in a lot of prevalent moments. That has to do quite a bit with how Tony is as a character. Mortensen actually gained quite a bit of weight to get into this character, and you just see him eating a lot. He has a noticeable belly throughout the film, and also just the attitude he carries throughout the rest of the narrative, the interactions he has between himself and Don, and clashing with his more refined and stuck-up personality. Yeah, it was a laugh riot to say the least. That angle of the film did surprise me quite a bit, and again, with Peter Farrelly's direction, he was not only able to really balance the tone of this movie so exceptionally well, but also in the focus of the narrative. He did a fantastic job weaving the narrative, having a clear vision for what he was trying to do and telling this story, and I was just so engaged watching this movie throughout. It is so well paced at about 2 hours and 10 minutes, and I never felt it skip a beat or drag at any given moment. Other things I have to praise with this film have to do with the technical elements. Like I've mentioned before, with the production design, this movie does look and feel like it is set within the early 1960s, and also just with the way the costumes looked, some of the locations, even the car that Viggo Mortensen's Tony drives around is a really nice looking piece of art, if I do say so myself. Looking back, I really don't have a lot in the way of complaints with this movie because of how it is so expertly crafted. One thing that I will say that this movie does have, and it will depend on how you view that element in terms of it affecting your enjoyment of this film, and it has to do with the predictability of it. As great as this movie is, in my opinion, yeah, you can tell that it does go in a certain direction in terms of how it would wrap up, what kind of movie it is trying to be in the first place. But in retrospect, I really didn't think that was that big of an issue at all. It really was something that I blocked out of my mind when I did consider how well made this movie is and how much of a crowd pleaser and feel good kind of film it is. The audience I saw this movie with was so great. It was pretty decently filled in terms of how many people were in the auditorium with me, mostly senior citizens, but wow. The engagement within the audience I thought was excellent, just from all of the laughs, a lot of hard laughs actually, with the comedy, but also just how the story gave a lot of people a really nice reaction to it. There was a good round of applause at the end of the movie, and I have to agree. I even had a conversation with two older women after the movie who were actually waiting for the next show to start for it. And yeah, I went on and on and on how I really dug this movie as a whole. And that's what these kind of movies I think do best, in not just bringing out the good senses and emotions in people, but also in them synergizing or really connecting with how the messages and otherwise themes of this movie really convey onto them. All in all, this movie is the definition of a crowd pleaser in what it sets out to do, and I think the execution was tremendous. From the phenomenal performances from Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali, the co-writing and directing by Peter Farrelly, the overall tone, the engagement I had with it, I just think that this is a terrific movie as a whole. Again, I think audiences that do see it will really get a big kick out of it. This is also just a fitting movie to see during this time of year, as at the time I'm recording this video, it is December 1st, which means the holiday season is coming, and this movie does take place right around the time of Christmas, before Christmas actually, and that's one element of the movie plot-wise to where Mortensen's Tony wants to get home in time for Christmas to be with his family. So all of that, just the merriness and the all-around positivity this movie has with its execution, that's another reason to go see this film. This is deserving, in my opinion, of all of the awards buzz it is getting, particularly for the performances, and it is something that I hope does have more prevalence as awards season takes a bigger shape. This is one of my favorite movies of the year so far. I loved Green Book. I highly recommend it. My final verdict for Green Book is 4.5 out of 5 stars. Thank you all, as always, for watching. Be sure to like this video, comment on what you thought of Green Book, social media links in the description, subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll catch you on the next movie review.